Michelle left. Well, that's not good. Mild casualization. Yeah, like our goal is community. Like, I kind of miss 150. It's kind of strange to say it, but I really like being in 150 in terms of working with students. So, and let's just see. Let's just do a quick check. It's 3 minutes. 3 minutes and plan and something. 3 minutes until we do something different than what we're doing now. We have confirmation that lecture 28 is now up on Bilibili. For those of you, Prof. Foster is confused. Just finishing UTOR ID plus last 6 digits of library number. UTOR ID. And library number is above the barcode on your T card. To the right. I love the video quality. Yep, 5 to 6 seconds delay is about right. We don't know how to get it faster, but life goes on. So, is the cooking thread on Discourse? Yes, yes it is. Yes, and it needs more participants. By the way, just because like I should mention this, is there anybody here of Dutch background or of enjoys Dutch cuisine in as much as there's Dutch cuisine? Yes, and it needs more participants.
Are you going to finish the point about Dutch cuisine, or was that just going to hang it out there?
Well, the point about Dutch cuisine is the thing I posted in the cooking section. That was a classic Dutch piece of Dutch cuisine. Basically, it's you boil carrots, onions, and potatoes and mash them up. Ukrainian cuisine intersection. There we go. I haven't had to look at a set notation in forever. Okay, everybody. Hey, wait. The whole teaching team is online, so I don't have to be the one who's like, okay, everybody, this time. I can be like just a random person. It is, however, 1:10. And the session is being recorded, so we are here for lecture 31. As it is the day of a in-studio deliverable, I'm not sure about the echoing delay. We had it before and then it went away and now it seems to be back and no one knows why and it's weird. I can always mute myself later. That would be nice. If you're just keep us posted about echoes and things. Nonetheless, it is the lecture before an in-studio deliverable. And so usually it's Q&A. So very much this is going to be a Q&A on beta to start. So we'd like to start focused on the immediate, and then we're going to work on planning the remainder of the course. So we don't have anything prepped. Quite literally, we have nothing prepped, except this OneNote page on which to take notes. So with that said, questions? Anybody? Leaving it open for you for questions.
Hand raise function.
Something hand raises.
So there's a question on Mattermost right now.
Okay.
It says, hey, teaching team, question on verification. Reading through the beta release doc, one of the primary questions asks about how we verified our current design concepts so far and how we're planning to verify them going forward. With the relaxation of the constraint in creating a test protocol and the reduction of available resources for conducting testing, here's the key question. Is the expectation for verification largely based in finding research for measurements and in filling out our comparison matrices, or is it something else?
So I'm going to capture the question as my colleagues start to answer. Anybody?
So I can add in my thoughts, and I know there's other members of the teaching team, so please jump in. We are certainly hoping that you will engage in research. I think I've said this a few times when I was filling in for Professor Foster. But given your current limitations, work within them to do as much as you can. If that means you are doing research online, if it means that you are developing calculations or coming up with ways of describing or analyzing things that do not involve going outside or acquiring additional materials, that's fine. We will be understanding.
Professor Sheridan just mentioned, things like a ESC102 free body-ish thing would be awesome. Or if you want to do like a big O analysis, if you're doing an algorithm for moving and sorting. In a lot of cases, because engineering is fundamentally a course in a discipline of mathematical modeling, if you do dig a little bit, especially in textbooks, there's usually some kind of mathematical models for most things. Now they tend to be more discrete as opposed to covering multiple things, but or interconnected things. But grab it like like a free body diagram, a big O. Trying to think of your other courses and what they've taught you. Predator prey models. If you can bring that in, that's great. Again, it's not expected. If it's there, it provides just that next piece of evidence. And I think another piece to add is the goal is not necessarily to have the one perfect piece of verification. Much like with research, you might have like a little bit here and a little bit there. So this research paper says this, and someone posted to Instagram doing it, and it kind of ties to something from one of our instructors in this course. And so you're going to be piecing together weaker forms of verification in order to create that case. Do we know if that...
One of the things we had talked about with prototypes was a lack of expectation of things being interconnected. I think to kind of reiterate what Foster was just saying, it's not so much necessarily that it's weaker, but that it's less interconnected.
So yeah, more discrete elements of verification versus interconnected, just to emphasize that. And then this idea of, much with research, sort of triangulated or multi-directional, for lack of a better term. Verification is fine. And again, that's in contrast to the one big one. Do we know who asked the question? Because it'd be nice to be able to check if they feel that it's been answered.
I will check with them on Mattermost.
Okie doke.
I've got another question that came in on Mattermost.
Okay.
Oh, the answer is yes, that helps.
Okay, cool.
I may have been overthinking it. Okay, other question from Mattermost. I was wondering what the expectations on process are for beta. Because of the changes, should we be expected to have the same amount of time spent on process as in alpha, for example? And as a clarification, by process, they mean converging/diverging processes.
So acknowledging, and you're going to probably hear a very similar set of answers to a lot of things. So we're acknowledging that, in wall clock time, there's been a few weeks, but in useful operationable time where you could focus, it's been a lot less. So, and again, normally I'd be looking to the corner to look at my teaching colleagues. I would say we are expecting advancement from, sorry, alpha was last term. Okay, I'm going to interpret it slightly differently. If you compare right now beta to the amount of work we were able to do in alpha, there has been additional time and you have additional experience. So my snappy reaction would be to say we would expect more iteration or possibly more use of tools. So either more cycles or less but more comprehensive cycles than we would have compared to the Praxis 1 alpha. Teaching team, is that how you're interpreting?
Can I respond as someone who's going to be watching these?
Of course.
So I think one of the things is I'm not expecting to see, I mean, I saw some pretty awesome prototypes last term, and I know some people already have some pretty awesome prototypes, but we know the limitations with those. But in terms of what Foster just said, in terms of the tools and thinking things through, that's really kind of what I'm looking for when I watch beta this week.
Looking for reactions. So one of the things that when we say things like that, we are also looking sort of to get a feel for the class, in terms of, chittering, so to speak, but don't chitter. Just, yep, that sounds good or not. Yep, chitter. All right. Okay. Relative expectations and process. So I'm going to also answer the question slightly differently. We're going to talk as we move forward into handbook about the nature of design processes. And the teaser is that the vast majority of processes exist because someone screwed up. And in the postmortem debriefing, someone said in response to the screw up, we should have an explicit step in our process that checks that. And so processes almost always get bigger and bigger and bigger because there's always more new and interesting ways to screw things up. So if I look at the question of expectations for process in terms of process complexity, we're not expecting at this stage that you have this incredibly intricate process. That we're going to more interested in handbook when you look back over the term and say, okay, if I look back over the term with this idea of maximizing opportunity and what steps should I put in my process to do amazing, and minimizing regret, what steps should I put in my process to be a little more, to manage risk? That's when process complexity comes in. But at this stage, if we say process complexity, we're not really expecting you to be having these massive intricacies, but instead we're expecting you to either, if again, subject to the situation, have turned a little bit faster or a little bit more, or brought a larger number of tools to bear. So hopefully that all follows. Chitter, yes, reasonable.
Okay, I'm going to move ahead to another question on Mattermost, and I see Nick's got one in the comments box as well. So we've got two on Mattermost, and then we'll go to Nick's one. So a question from a student. My team came up with sketching the final 5-ish candidate designs, 2D sketches as prototypes, and they're using that sketch as the prototype relatively intuitively. They're using it kind of for research, but it's limited. And so that sketch prototype is the primary evidence they're using and trying to fill out their comparison matrix. So the question is in terms of process. If each person does the comparison matrix rankings individually, and then they average them out to have a team comparison matrix, is this considered as sufficient given their limited testing situation?
Those of you who know Foster's red flags, someone want to suggest what red flag I heard in Professor Sheridan's sentences? No, not bad. Yeah, Adam's got
Averaging.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. So my I am not doing so good at estimating measurements. Reasonable. My immediate reaction is no, for the reason that averages lose information. I think what you're describing is a great process. So I'll put in my usual careful on averaging because of data loss. But the idea of saying, much like you would do idea generation, everyone works separately, and then you come together, so that way you can then bounce ideas off. That together apart cycle, really good idea, and it's shown to work really well in divergence. I think bringing it to convergence is a neat idea, and I think the reason for doing that. So I'm just going to make the note: cycling between individual to team to individual estimates is a really good idea. Actually, I'm going to go beyond that. I think it's a great idea, because all of you, to make your estimates, are going to be making different assumptions with different information. The aggregation of that, or I'm going to say, rather than aggregate, you now have a whole bunch of claims. Each of those estimated values is a claim, and having a quick little discussion saying, okay, this is pretty narrow, we're okay. This is huge, there's a huge variance. Now we're going to probably want to talk a bit more. Rather than aggregate indiscriminately, oh geez, I can't spell this. Indiscriminate, yeah. Here's open, yay. Use the variance to identify where more work is needed. And if you don't have time for more work, so we'll say, and, really 2 spaces, tag the result as being less certain. So if you, less certain. If you look at the pairwise comparison code that I did, it kind of had this idea that A beats B with only a certain degree of confidence. So you can actually go through and sort of annotate your measurements with your degree of confidence and why that confidence is or is not there. So it's a little bit more work, but what you're doing is you're managing the risk of the assumptions that you're making, you're managing the risk of difference, and you're acknowledging that certain things you're pretty confident in, certain things you're not. Okay, teaching team and or student check, how are we like in here?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, yep, and Ellie on, yep, okay. So,
okay, so we're on to Nick's question on the chat window. I will play air
okay.
traffic controller.
I'm not sure that converging to 3 designs would be the best decision for beta. We have 4. So the question is just again to paraphrase, do we have to get down to 3 given the circumstances and uncertainties? Can we keep 4 or more? All right, so I think that's the question. I'm going to teaching team it first, and then I'll come back in.
Can I actually throw the question into a different context? Because it seems to me the question is about the challenge of making decisions when you have insufficient information. So the reason if I'm understanding you correctly, Nick, the reason you're concerned to hang on to 4 rather than go down to 3 designs is because you haven't had a chance to do any more detail on your verification. It seems to me to be a reasonable reason to hang on to a 4th one. If we've got, if I can do a little bit of verification on this one and a little bit of verification on that one, and I want to hold on to both of them right now because of that, that seems to me a reasonable position to take.
So I'm going to agree with Professor Irish, but I'm going to add sort of an open question to the room. If you have more than 3, or even more than 2, say, if you're still at this, so again, okay, I'm going to contextualize. Normally, there's 3 more weeks. So beta was last week, and there's like 3 more weeks until showcase. And so we wanted you to still be a little bit broad before you got into detailed design. Now, we've shifted beta for lots of good reasons. And there's less time, and we're not even sure where showcase is going to go. So you do want to narrow down as best you can, but acknowledging the limitations. Put yourself in the shoes of the teaching team or of a project manager. If you're saying, given uncertainties and lack of data, we're still broader than we might be otherwise, what's the question you would imagine that they would immediately ask you in response to that, you saying that to them? So what's a good solid question that would come from, yeah, we're still wider than we might otherwise be? Anybody? Yep, Stephen, I like it. The question, yeah, what are you going to do about it? But specifically, what is that missing information? What is that uncertainty? Can you highlight what are the 2 or 3 key things that if that shows up and that gets certain is going to have the most impact? So be ready for a question that asks, what key information will you need to find / create if you have the opportunity to make the decision? So yeah, so if you're going to keep it wide open, do it, but be ready for the counter. All right, check. Any other thoughts, teaching team or students, on this notion of, hey, there's a lot more uncertainty than is the norm, so we haven't been able to converge down as much as might be expected for this stage of the term? Feeling good. Designs parallel. Okay, so I'm going to declare that in the absence of anything. I'm going to declare that question answered. Professor Sheridan, you seem to be managing questions, so anything?
No, we don't have anything else coming in on individual things on Mattermost. There was one question, but I think we need to get moving to Showcase. I think Chase, your question on Mattermost, we've answered. It's in the general discussion. Everyone can see it. I would propose moving to Showcase, and I think Rob just seconded that on our messages.
I would agree.
Oh,
All
wait,
right.
Hold on. One more question coming in from James.
James?
James, we're ready for you. On what planning refers to on the analytic assessment?
Irish, this one would be a good one for you.
All right, I'm just going to zip over to take a close look so I answer based on exactly what's being asked. So give me just a second to take a quick one.